much pressure do you think there is when you're dressing a mafia boss? I mean, really, like if you screw up a mafia boss's wardrobe, you might find yourself sleeping with the fishes, right? And I didn't want that. So how we got to Franzese, there's not really a magical story here. I didn't have to fight different street thugs and then eventually ascend all the way to the mafia boss to picture my suits. Him and Cammie, his wife, they had dinner, I think, with Jordan Peterson and Tammy Peterson. And I remember the reply back I got was that they actually were talking about Jordan's suits, and so they just really liked them. Especially as Michael, you know, he's had all the suits in the world you can imagine. He knows what a great suit feels like. He knows what a not so great suit feels like. So he has to be very pleased with your work in order to publicly promote it. And Michael loved our suits. Let's see what Michael actually says about it.
So many people have approached me with, you know, clothing, merchandise over the years. I've said no to every one of them because to me, it just wasn't up to the right standard. Not necessarily my standard, just the right standard for any guy. And I was just blown away with just the detail, I think, more than anything else. It was the detail and the fit. Everything was perfect.
So we set up Michael to get measured, and it was pretty funny because my president, Jason, flew down to LA to measure Michael. And Michael had been in the midst of a tour or some speaking engagement, so he had landed at the airport, and Jason intercepted him at the airport, and I think they went into like an airport, a corner of an airport somewhere, or maybe like they went to the airport hotel and got a boardroom for like 30 minutes, and Jason took care of that. So it was a very sort of quick and very clandestine kind of a mafia measuring thing, and Franzese didn't really know what was going on, and Jason was like, you know, I don't know, I have to catch him like midway between flights or in a layover or something. So took care of that, did some research, delivered his first suit, which was a suit that was a classic cut square bottom 1950s mobster suit. Square bottom is a very unique feature on a double-breasted suit, but the inside lining we had researched had a family tree of the Colombo crime family and where Michael and, you know, the rest of his family fit in, and Michael said it was very accurate. He said it was very good. We actually borrowed that from Rudy Giuliani when he had mapped the family out. So that first suit went fantastic. I think it was a perfect fitting the first time, so no alterations. And Franzese is, he was very concerned. He said he wasn't sure we were going to nail it. You know, he's had some issues in the past. We have some clips of him talking about that. We can put it up.
I don't normally do this because my past experiences, I just didn't have the patience for it. And quite often I didn't like the clothing, the way it fit afterwards, and we had to go back 3, 4, 5, 6 times. I just don't have the patience. This has been a great experience. Everything is fit just perfectly. I was a little concerned about the pants. Sometimes I have trouble with that, but they fit like a glove, you know, very, very good. And it's been an overall great experience.
Michael and I had a really good discussion about horology in the mob, which is not what it sounds like. Horology is the study of watches and watchmaking, right? It was probably my favorite conversation I had with him because I was so personally fascinated. He talked about how, you know, mobsters gave each other Rolexes and like iced out watches, and which mobsters took a lot more interest in watches and which didn't. He said there was definitely a culture of opulence. And so even though they were supposed to hide their wealth a little bit, there's definitely like a culture of opulence when it came to cars and watches. And so we made a suit to Michael to reflect the passage of time. It's an off yellow suit, which is interesting because we have a video of Michael saying he would never have thought of that himself.
At one point in time, I probably wouldn't have wore yellow. I didn't want to stand out that much, but now I think it works.
But I recommended it. I thought it would be a fantastic color. See, the thing about that color, there's a marked difference between Italian Americans and Italians in general as to their skin tone, right? Like a typical Italian is kind of white, and so it's very difficult to pull off a yellowy suit because it just washes out. But for guys with darker skin tones, it's a great color, and Italian Americans are overwhelmingly Sicilian, so they're darker skinned, and so this suit I knew would work amazing for Michael. He absolutely rocked it, and the clock and watch and time theme inside the suit also adds to the suit's mystique, and it adds to the suit's pizzazz. Would you guys wear a yellow suit like that? That's a good question, right? Because even as a sport coat, it's a pretty audacious choice. And here we have a full suit. And by the way, we juxtaposed it with a black shirt. You're not going to wear a suit like that with a tie. It's going to be too formal. This is definitely a smart casual to casual suit. It's definitely not even business casual. It's just a little bit too friendly to be a business casual suit. But for a guy who is living life on his own terms, and especially in a warmer climate, because those colors tend to be reflective of summer weather, this is a very unique and ambitious piece. So one of the classic LGFG looks, of course, is the suit with your name in the stripe. That is something we've done for Martin Ford, for Russell Peters, for Rob Schneider, for sure. Ozzy Osbourne's got a self-stripe with his name in it. So we did one for Michael Franzese as well. And this one was very cool. So the color, it's a wine color suit, right? You don't see that very much. It's a bombastic piece, you know, and it's quite deep and it's quite striking and it's quite perplexing in a way. It's polarizing, right? So with this suit, we wanted to reflect Michael's ambitions within the wine industry. Do you know Michael Franzese's got a wine brand, and it's a pretty successful brand. He's in all, you know, stores all over the United States now. I think even in the world. I think it's Armenian wine, which Armenians make great wine. Like the Armenians, the Georgians, those guys make fantastic wine. And so we wanted to have a wine color suit to reflect Michael's foray into the wine industry, the Franzese family wines. Italians. And then inside was a little bit different. Michael did a movie called Let There Be Light. He co-starred with Kevin Sorbo, who's another friend of LGFG Fashion House. And, you can see Kevin in some of our suits as well. So we did a sort of image of Jesus in there, with the Let There Be Light sort of movie insignia. And that suit has become a go-to for Michael. That suit is, again, representative of Michael Franzese's foray into the wine industry. He's now a vintner. That's the original Gangster suit that we did for Michael Franzese, the first one. If you're going to see it up close, you're going to notice the bottom of the suit does not cut away. It means there's no separation between the two sides, the two panels, left and the right panel of the front of the suit. It comes together and it squares off at the bottom. It's called a square bottom. This is a very 1950s look. So what happened in the 1950s was we were coming out of the Second World War. And during the Second World War, the U.S. had rations on a lot of products, including fabric. And so suits were minimized. And that's actually where we got the first skinny suit. And that's where that fashion evolved, is that people saved fabric by cutting suits slimmer, narrow lapels, slimmer cut, all that kind of stuff. And of course, the cutaway in the suit, everything else. In the 50s, things started going back to opulence. And so you got a lot more double-breasted suits, and you also got the square bottom, which on a double-breasted suit takes up more space. It uses up more fabric. So this was a reflected 1950s. And why the 50s? Because this was in a sense, the 50s were the heyday of the mob. Now, the mob, of course, was big in the 20s and 30s during Prohibition, but the 50s were one of the last great eras for the mob. In the 80s, the mob sort of had their swan song and they sort of dissipated through the 90s, and we don't see that anymore. So a lot of the timepieces we see by Scorsese kind of take us from the 20s into the 50s, and then some of the ones on the latter end go into kind of the 80s. But when you look at The Godfather, for example, that took place during World War II and thereafter. So this is where we evoked a sense of history and connected it to the Franzese family name, which of course was part of the Colombo crime family. I guess the question I would ask is, how could you possibly make a suit for Michael Franzese or make a collection of suits for Michael Franzese and not bring up The Godfather into it, right? Now, there's been a lot of excellent movies, including ones where Franzese's name has been mentioned, like Goodfellas. We have Casino, Donnie Brasco. There's a collection of these classic mob movies. I'm a huge fan of mob movies, and so is Michael, and we did have a good discussion with him about that. But I think the quintessential mob movie, of course, is the Godfather series. So we licensed an image of what looks like Vito Corleone, having a little bit of a Godfatherly look to him, and we put that into a beautiful three-piece pinstripe suit for Michael. Of course, we needed to use pinstripe because chalks and pins are sort of connected to the gangster look. If you had a conversation with Michael Franzese, he's got so many great insights. We actually had a podcast where me and Michael talked about Michael Corleone, and we talked about the Godfather movies and the meanings behind it, the going behind the scenes, the clothing in the movie, of course, the realism and the reflection on reality of what actually happened in real life with the movie. Check that out. I think we can maybe post a link to that podcast. It was one of my favorite podcasts I've ever done. So if you guys know me, you know I love corduroy. I love the fact that corduroy is so casual. It's kind of snuggly. It makes you feel a little bit chunky. It's a little bit warm, but it's soft, so it has that nice softness to it. And by the way, even though corduroy is warm, it doesn't protect you very well from wind because it's cotton, so it's not very tightly woven. So corduroy is actually really nice on like a warm, windy day. But the corduroy bomber jackets, actually safari jackets that we did for Michael Franzese, are a necessity for a man who doesn't need to dress up in a formal way, but still has the pragmatic sense to dress up for sort of day-to-day events, right? So we did a dark green, like almost an olive corduroy, and then we did one in a classic taupe corduroy. You can actually see that same fabric that we used for Michael Franzese's jacket that we used for Alice Cooper's suit from the 70s. That's another thing I like about corduroy is it's a callback, it's an allusion to the 1970s where the fabric was profoundly popular. And the inside of these jackets, we decided to go with a fighting theme, MMA. The reason for that is that boxing and fighting and the mob actually have a very long historic connection because of bookies, right? So one of the ways that a lot of the mobsters made money was, taking sports bets, and then if you didn't pay them, they'd break your thumbs and take over your business, right? So of course, Franzese's family was also involved in the betting business, which was a money-bringing business. And so we wanted to connect the history of the betting business with these jackets. So we went with a fighting theme, organized fighting theme. Now for the yellowish corduroy jacket, we went with a wine theme, again, reflecting back to the Michael Franzese vineyard or wine brand. And by the way, you should taste the wine. I had a glass with Michael at his house. It was excellent. And then the sort of classically taupe corduroy jacket is featuring a collection of classic cars. And again, cars were something that was absolutely paramount to the mob. They were very proud of the way that the cars they drove. They gave each other cars as gifts. Michael Franzese has this amazing story in his book Blood Covenant where he's driving, I think it was in a Rolls Royce with one of his henchmen, and the guy pulls the door on his Rolls Royce so hard that he pulls the handle off the door. So instead of going to fix it because it might have been bought with like laundered money or something, they take that car and they just like get rid of it, like drive it off, send it off a cliff, and they just go buy another Rolls Royce. Doesn't need to replace the handle, right? So we wanted to show the connection of and the significance of cars and the mob on this jacket for Michael Franzese. Guys, if you're enjoying this, I implore you to check out this book, The Michael Franzese Guide for Mastering Style and Elegance, where Michael Franzese takes you through a journey of everything that a man needs to know know about suits, safari jackets, bomber jackets, the different kind of lapels and fabrics and patterns and how to match different patterns, how to match fabrics to different occasions and events. Everything to do with clothing is in this encyclopedia. Check out the link and go ahead and get yourself a copy of this book. Guys, if you're enjoying this, I implore you to subscribe to this channel. You can get really cool stories about our work with global celebrities like Michael Franzese, like Ozzy Osbourne, like Alice Cooper, like Phil Heath, like Ronnie Coleman, like Jordan Peterson. You can get a lot of cool information about their clothing and their suits and how we design them and what they wear right here on this channel. One of the rarest pieces you'll see in a man's wardrobe that's appropriate for business casual and smart casual is the car coat. And it's also one of the most beautiful pieces you can possibly imagine. Now, we did a card coat for Dan Locke, and you can put that up here and maybe even show him talking about it a little bit. Outerwear is very important in your wardrobe because when you have on a car coat or an overcoat, that's your entire outfit. The car coat is effectively this. You might have seen this. It's a coat you button up. Okay, no, it's a coat you zip up, and then it has buttons on top as well. And so the car coat was actually something I think was put together in the 30s when people were driving cars. Remember, back then cars were not enclosed, right? Like you would sit in the car, it was like a horse carriage. It was open, there was wind and rain, so you needed to wear gloves, and you needed to wear a hat, and you needed to wear a coat. And so this coat protected you from the elements because you could zip it up and then button it over top. So you kind of had this inner layer that was protected by an outer layer. The car coat evolved as a status symbol for the wealthy and eventually sort of made it into the common man's lexicon, right? It's a very rare piece you don't see a lot of today, but I love it because of its stylistic implications, of historical acumen. Everything about the car coat is yes to me, so useful, so beautiful, so cool. One of the best conversations that I had with Michael Franzese was about his father's connection to boxing. Actually, his father had sparred with Rocky Marciano, right? Or they called him The Rock back then, or Rock. Where do you rank Marciano in the mix of things?
You got to say he was the greatest, you know, retired undefeated.
Right?
Yeah, retired undefeated. You know, my dad told me, my dad was an amateur fighter. He was close with Rocky. And he said, Michael, he said, when Rocky Marciano hit you, he would hit you in your arms because after you took a couple of punches from him, you couldn't lift your arms. And that's how he defeated so many fighters.
And so we wanted to pay homage to the boxing, again, as boxing is connected to the mob through bookies and obviously fixing fights and things like that. So we made some trainer suits for Michael Franzese.
Back in the 70s, we were into warm-up suits. I mean, you know, if we weren't wearing a regular suit, we were wearing warm-up suits. And they were the kind of that athletic, you remember what they were?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so we, my whole crew had them on. I loved them because they were comfortable, you know, so this reminds me of that. This is, I think Bugsy Siegel, Benny Siegel would wear something like this.
Okay, and why would he wear that?
He was kind of a flashy guy, you know, he was into the Hollywood scene. He had a lot of friends. George Raft was a good friend of his, and he was a good-looking guy, and he was kind of very dapper. And he dressed the part, you know, it's great.
And I'd love to hear your opinion, what you think about a bomber suit. It's a very unique garment, obviously a niche piece, not to be worn by everyone, but if you can pull it off, you're gonna be a Slav gangster. Well, one of the most important concepts, so Michael Franzese wrote a wonderful book. It's called Mafia-Democracy, where he talks about lobbying and just the lack of transparency within government. And of course, then you have this libertarian Bitcoin movement on the other end of that, where it's like people, you know, own their own money and it's untraceable by government and all that kind of stuff. So I'm a pretty big proponent of Bitcoin. I love the idea of having a government unconnected currency that's not able to be inflated, that's not able to be printed by the central bank, that gives people privacy and autonomy over their own money. So we did a moleskin suit because we wanted something different. We wanted something for a colder environment. But Franzese does travel. He was just in Ireland and England kind of doing his tour and giving shows and things like that. So we made a very unique moleskin suit with a Bitcoin theme to it. This is definitely what I would call a suit for the man that has every other suit on the planet. Franzese has a resounding wardrobe. You can actually learn about the fabrics here in the Michael Franzese Guide for Mastering Style and Elegance. And we'll tell you about the difference between cotton suits, linen suits, moleskins, you know, obviously wool, mohair, cashmere, alpaca, even bison wool. I mean, we have all of that stuff in there, so check it out. These are kind of two different business ventures that Franzese has ventured into in different parts of his life, right? So before all the imprisonment stuff and right as he met his wife, Franzese was in the movie business. He was producing films, and the mob has a strong connection to films and the movie business. It's a sexy business, so of course they're going to want to be a part of it. And then the other side of it is after coming out of prison, Franzese reformed, became a Christian, and obviously has promulgated a different kind of message about how to lead one's life. And so the blue suit actually focuses on Franzese's book writing career. He's published, I think, 4 or 5 books. I've read Blood Covenant. I've read Mafia-Democracy. I've also read, I think it's called Michael Franzese's Guide to Doing Business. So the red suit is going to be an homage to Franzese's movie career, and the blue suit is an homage to Franzese's book writing career. And that sort of covers both sides of the creative media that Franzese has put out. And I really, really, really want you to read Blood Covenant. Take a look at this beautiful trench coat we did for Michael. It is a belted trench coat. So some trench coats come with a belt, some without. This comes with a belt. And we did a pizza theme about Michael's, pizza venture. He makes the best pizza in the world that comes from a vending machine, by the way. And Michael is not the kind of guy that promotes something that he's not got his own money behind. So he really believes in this. Classic double-breasted pinstripe, guys. We talked about pinstripe a lot. When you're going with a gangstery theme, you should definitely have a pinstripe or a chalk stripe suit. Now that depends on the body type, right? Because not all body types are conducive to the kind of stripes you might want to wear. Let me give you guys some examples, okay? So the kind of stripes that you have your chalk stripe and you have your pinstripe. So that's for suits, right? Now you also have some other patterns like a bangle stripe and an awning stripe. These are going to be more for creative suits. Like a bangle stripe might be something for like a seersucker. An awning stripe is something, you're going to see only like in Naples on a very creative thing. But whether or not you can or should wear a chalk stripe or a pinstripe is going to be contingent on your body shape, right? So for example, a chalk stripe, and also the event, right? Like for example, a chalk stripe is great for business and formal, but you can't wear a chalk stripe semi-formally or in a summer setting. Whereas the pinstripe is going to help you achieve a different kind of outcome, because with a pinstripe, you can wear it only for business and nothing else. So that's why I think why gangsters like pinstripe, because it's a real business suit. They have the sit down, they go to their favorite pizzeria, have a sit down, talk face to face, and hopefully no brains will be splashed on the table. Like that's also important, right? And then you have your different body types. So for example, Michael is a guy with broad shoulders. Like he's a broad shoulder guy, average build with broad shoulders. So he should not wear a pencil stripe and he should not wear other kind of stripes, which is why we had to consider that when we're making a jacket for him. Check out the book, learn how to wear different stripes. So one of the really interesting chapters of stories in Michael Franzese's books is how he would travel frequently between New York and Florida to conduct business. He was kind of one of the main guys that would bring like a lot of the mafia's business into Florida. So he needed to change his wardrobe up because, New York was it was hot and humid in the summer, but it was certainly very cold in the winter. Whereas Florida is just always hot and humid. So Michael needed to update his wardrobe. So he talks about in the book wearing linen and silk suits. Silk is better suited as a blend with with a wool in a suit, but linen is great on its own, right? So we did a linen suit for Michael Franzese. We did add a little silk to it to give it a little bit of luster and luxury. And we put little fishes inside to pay homage to the phrase sleeping with the fishes, which is a nice way of a mobster saying we're going to throw your body in the ocean, right? So you don't want to be sleeping with the fishes. And let me ask you guys a question, right? Do you have a linen suit in your wardrobe? Or would you like to click this link and check us out on the Franzese store online and get yourself a copy of this suit yourself?